Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. It starts with bread in the rain. You know the scene. The boy in the bakery doorway, the girl half dead with hunger, the smell of burned crust drifting into the mud behind the shop. He glances at her, glances at the ruined loaves, and makes a decision. He still throws the bread. But this time, it isn't the beginning of a love story. At face value, nothing has changed. Peeta Mellark takes a beating from his mother, tosses the charred bread to the starving seam girl, and walks back into the warm yellow light of the bakery. In this version, though, there's no spark, no imprint, no years of watching her at school, no silent promise to keep her alive if their names are ever drawn. Just a fleeting act of pity in a district where pity is a dangerous luxury. So here's the real question. If that bread doesn't turn into a crush, what else quietly disappears with it? Because in the original timeline, that moment becomes the foundation of Peeta's entire relationship to Katniss. The reason he steps onto Caesar Flickerman's stage and detonates the star-crossed lovers narrative in front of the whole Capitol. In this timeline, he never does. No childhood fixation, no studying the girl with the braid at lunch, no confession that blindsides her and gives Haymitch a weapon to use on the sponsors. Peeta goes into the 74th Hunger Games the way every other tribute is trained to go in. To win. There is a lot to uncover here, because the question isn't just, do Katniss and Peeta end up together? It's, does Katniss even survive the 74th Games if the boy from her district isn't secretly playing for her side? And if he's not, does Panem ever get the rebellion it needs? Or does the Capitol system hold for another decade while someone else dies trying to break it? On paper, one boy's unrequited crush feels tiny compared to war, propaganda, and an entire nation of starving districts. That part matters because canon keeps telling you the opposite. Peeta's feelings warp the rules of the arena, twist the Capitol's story about the games, and literally force a rule change that lets two victors from the same district walk out alive. Take away the crush, and he's not volunteering as tribute for her safety. He's not joining the careers to misdirect them. He's not bleeding out in a riverbank hoping she'll win. He's hunting, bargaining, surviving. So this is where we talk about the real stakes. Without Everlark as the emotional core, does the rebellion fizzle, get delayed, or mutate into something much darker? If Katniss isn't half of a tragic romance but just a clever girl with a bow, does Snow ever feel threatened enough to lose control, or does someone even more ruthless step into that vacuum later on? By the time we're done, we're going to cover who actually lives through the 74th Games in this timeline, what happens to the Mockingjay image without a love story to soften it, and who pays the price when a single burned loaf never turns into a revolution. Why one missing love story could kill a revolution. So here's where one tiny change suddenly feels enormous. You take Peeta's love out of the equation And you don't just lose a cute cave scene. You cut the bridge between one arena and an entire civil war. In the 74th games, everything is small scale. 24 kids, one forest, one cornucopia. At face value, it's a brutal local event that should stay contained to that year's bloodbath. But the second rebellion, that's every district, every industry, the capital, years of propaganda and strategy. The emotional narrative of two tributes in love is what stretches across that gap and says, this isn't just a game anymore, this is a story you're invested in. So why did that story work? Why did Snow tolerate Katniss's stunt with the berries at first? Why did sponsors suddenly pour money into a pair of nobodies from District 12? Why did the Capitol care enough to literally change the rules of the games midstream, something they almost never do? There is a lot to uncover here, but it all circles one point: Peeta's public, inconvenient, very dramatic love. His confession on Caesar Flickerman's stage gives Haymitch a weapon. Now Katniss's every act of defiance can be reframed as devotion. When she volunteers for Prim, when she honors Rue, when she pulls out those berries, Snow can tell himself, and more importantly, he can tell the Capitol, that this isn't a budding revolutionary. This is a girl in a dangerous relationship, driven by emotion, not ideology. That part matters because it buys her time to live, time for the districts to start whispering, time for the Mockingjay image to grow before Snow decides she's a threat that has to be removed. Here's the real question: what happens when Peeta doesn't give them that excuse? No love confession, no star-crossed lovers, no cave romance to soften the edges. Katniss is just defiant. A tribute from a problem district who salutes the cameras with a three-finger symbol and plays chicken with the rules of the games. Suddenly, there's no comforting narrative for the Capitol audience to cling to. No promise that this is all about personal feelings instead of political rot. And victory itself? Winning never meant the end of the games. It meant you became a permanent piece on the board. A victor, a mentor, a walking reminder of the Capitol's power. The Katniss-Peeta relationship is the reason those pieces become propaganda tools for both sides. Change that relationship, and you don't just change who gets out of the arena. You rewrite years of interviews, victory tours, quarter-quell speeches, and hijacked broadcasts. This is where we talk about systems. The romance isn't just chemistry, it's a mechanism of control and spectacle. Remove it, and the Capitol and the districts still need a story to latch onto. But without a love story to soften the brutality, the next narrative that rises up might be colder, harsher, and a lot less interested in keeping anyone alive. So if Peeta never falls in love, what new story fills that vacuum? And who gets sacrificed to make it convincing? Our lens. Peeta as Panem's butterfly effect. So here's the move we're going to make in this video. We're going to treat Peeta's love not as a crush, not as a cute subplot, but as a variable in Panem's operating system. Change that one input, and the whole program of the games, the rebellion, and even the post-war order starts spitting out different results. At face value, Peeta is the nice bread boy from the poor end of District 12 who happens to soften our very spiky protagonist. He tosses her burnt bread, he paints, he decorates cakes. It all reads small and personal. But here's the real question. What if that private devotion is actually a structural force, the thing that bends Capitol rules, redirects where the violence lands, and gives the rebellion a human, vulnerable face it otherwise wouldn't have? This is where we talk about lens. We're going to cover 3 layers at once. First, character psychology, how Peeta's feelings shape his own risk-taking and Katniss's sense of responsibility. Second, game theory inside the arena, how 2 tributes from the same district, coordinating around love changes, sponsors, and game makers. Third, macro politics, how that story scales up into Snow's strategy, District 13's propaganda, and the eventual shape of Panem after the war. Think about the reaping onward as a chain reaction. In canon, Peeta walks on Caesar Flickerman's stage and confesses love, handing Haymitch a ready-made narrative, star-crossed lovers from a dead-end district. That part matters because it turns the 74th games into a romance the Capitol can't resist and can't fully control. Sponsors pay to keep the story alive. The rule change to allow 2 victors from the same district suddenly makes sense to the audience. The berry stunt becomes possible. Delete the love, and you don't just delete the cave kisses, you delete the reason to change the rules at all. You delete Snow's excuse that Katniss's defiance is for love, not rebellion. You delete the emotional spine of the Mockingjay image, from the arena tenderness to the horror of Peeta's hijacking. There is a lot to uncover here, because we're not just asking whether Katniss ends up single, we're asking whether the Mockingjay ever exists in a form we recognize. So in this timeline, Peeta never imprints on Katniss. He still remembers the bread, sure, but it's guilt or distant kindness, not devotion. On the train, Haymitch doesn't see a ready romance to sell. He sees 2 separate assets. In the arena, Peeta can join the careers purely to win, not to misdirect them away from Katniss. Do they even share sponsors? Does Rue ever get that bread from District 11 if the audience isn't already primed to see Katniss as one half of a tragic pair? And that's just the 74th games. In Catching Fire, no Everlark means no wedding tour, no pregnancy stunt, no district-wide investment in their relationship as a symbol. District 13 has to build a colder kind of hope around Katniss. Less girl on fire in love, more precision weapon. The war still might happen, but is it harsher, shorter on mercy, and missing the one victor who kept insisting other people's lives were worth saving? Our next step is to follow that altered chain, stage by stage, and see who survives when Peeta stops bending the rules toward love. From reaping to war, how we'll break this timeline. So how do you actually pull on that one thread, Peeta's love, and watch the whole tapestry of Panem start to warp? We're not just hand-waving a darker vibe and calling it a day. We're going to cover this as a full alternate timeline, step by step, so you can see exactly where the games, the war, and the so-called hope of the districts bend or break. First stop is the 74th Hunger Games, from the reaping all the way to the mutts at the cornucopia. This is where we talk about the small, early moments you usually take for granted. Peeta staring at Katniss on the stage, the bread story on the train, the rooftop conversations in the Capitol. At face value, those are just character beats. Here's the real question. What happens when those beats never turn into a crush, or a confession, or a promise to keep her alive instead of himself? In that first arc, we'll track how Haymitch's entire strategy has to mutate. No love confession on Caesar's stage means no star-crossed lovers from District 12 inches to sell, no easy sponsor gifts dropping from the sky, and no obvious reason for the Capitol audience to demand a 2-victor rule change. That part matters because the berry stunt only works if the games have already been twisted into a romance narrative. If Peeta is playing to win, not protect, Does he still join the careers? Does he still mislead them away from Katniss, or does he help hunt her down? Then we move into Catching Fire and the Quarter Quell, and this is where there is a lot to uncover here. Without Everlark as Panem's favourite relationship, the second arena looks very different. We'll ask, does Snow even pick the reap from existing victors twist if the Capitol isn't obsessed with Katniss and Peeta as a pair? If he does, do Finnick, Johanna and Beatty still risk everything for a girl who's just a symbol with a bow, not half of the love story that sold them hope the year before? Mid-video, we're diving straight into character psychology. How does a Peeta without love reshape Katniss's emotional arc? Without soft bread boy in the cave, does she harden into something much closer to Gale's relentless logic or Johanna's corrosive anger? We'll walk through specific scenes, treetops, the beach, the training center, and ask why each choice either pushes her toward connection or strips it away. From there, we zoom out into Mockingjay and the war. We'll compare how the books and movies frame Everlark, the novels leaning into Katniss's inner conflict, the films spotlighting the romance as a visual anchor. Then, we'll stress test both versions. Remove Peeta's love. Does the propaganda machine still work? Or does Coin have to build a colder, more militaristic Mockingjay from day one? And at the end, we're going to push it to the bleak edge. A rebellion without Everlark at its heart. Is Panem actually worse off when no one in power has been trained again and again to choose one fragile human relationship over perfect victory? That's where our finale lives. Welcome to the arena, this channel's game plan. So, if we're pulling Everlark out of the equation, where does that leave us? It leaves us here, in the arena of this channel. If you're new and you just fell down a Hunger Games rabbit hole at 3 in the morning, this is where we talk about what Panem would look like if you treated it as a real historical record instead of just a YA trilogy. We're going to cover the politics, the propaganda, the personal relationships, and every tiny decision that changes who walks out of the games as a victor. At face value, this video is about one boy not falling in love. But here's the real question. Why does that single missing crush threaten to unravel an entire rebellion? That part matters because our whole channel is built on questions exactly like that. What if Rue survived and District 11's grief had a living symbol? How did the 10th Games break Panem long before Katniss ever volunteered? There is a lot to uncover here when you zoom out from one arena and look at the system that built it. If you've seen our breakdown of What If Rue Survived, you know the format. We didn't just say, she lives. We tracked how that survival would shift Thresh's choices, District 11's uprisings, Katniss's trauma, and even Snow's risk calculations. Same with how the 10th Games broke Panem. We went back to those proto-games and treated them as the messy pilot episode the Capitol keeps pretending never happened. This Peeta scenario is part of that same long-form autopsy of the games as a political machine. Any victor will tell you the games don't end when the cannon fires, and our channel doesn't stop at the arena walls either. We follow the ripple effects all the way to the Mockingjay, to Cohen, to post-war District 12 and the empty shells of Victor's village. Why does the Capitol build a hilltop suburb just to bomb the rest of the district? Why does Snow risk the third quarter quell twist that destroys the promise of safety for victors? Those are the questions we live in. So if you want more of that, more what if the rule change never happened, More, how does a single sponsor gift rewrite an entire war? More slow, obsessive walks through Panem's worst decisions. You can always join the little victor's village we're building here. Subscribe, stick around, become one of the regulars who already knows which train compartment Haymitch passed out in. Because from here on, we're stepping back into the arena. We've set the rules of this timeline. Peeta doesn't love Katniss. Now we run the games again under those conditions. Reaping, train, interviews, bloodbath, mutts, berries, every choice gets replayed. And the real tension, seeing which version of Panem crawls out of that arena alive. Reaping without roses, a colder Peeta steps forward. So we're back on the cracked concrete of the District 12 square. But this time the story's missing one invisible thread. No childhood crush, no secret promise Peeta made to himself about the girl with the braid. Same names, same bowl of slips. This is where we talk about Peeta's backstory, because that part matters, because it rewires every choice he makes. He still remembers her, the seam girl who sings to a dying Mockingjay, the one he saw rooting through trash in the rain while his mother screamed. He still burns the bread on purpose. He still throws it to her. But at face value, he files it under guilt and decency, not destiny. You help a starving girl because you're not a monster. Then you go back to frosting cakes and trying not to get hit. So when Effie Trinket pulls Prim's name, the script doesn't change. Katniss still screams. She still volunteers. The district still goes silent. But look at Peeta in this version. When his name is called, he doesn't freeze on Katniss's face as if the games just handed him a tragic love story. He goes white, sure, but his eyes are on the Justice Building, on the train, on the arena. He's not thinking, I get to die for her. He's thinking, I might die with her in the way. Here's the real question. What does that tiny shift do to the train ride? In canon, you see the start of a strange, fragile hope between them. Shared bread, shared jokes about Haymitch face-planting. In this timeline, Peeta is polite, careful, distant. He thanks her for the dandelion in his memory, maybe, but he doesn't reach for an emotional bond. Every conversation is tactical. What's your hunting range? How good is your shot? Can we both win? And under that, should we even try? Haymitch feels that temperature drop immediately. Back then, he clocked Peeta's staring and thought, perfect. A hook the capital will eat up. Star-crossed lovers in a coal district? That sells. It gives sponsors a reason to care. Here, all he sees are two traumatized kids who barely look at each other. No romance, no built-in narrative, no easy way to turn them into a story instead of statistics. So we're going to cover his problem, because there is a lot to uncover here. Without a ready-made love angle, what does Haymitch pitch to the capital? Two scrappy underdogs from a hopeless district? A ruthless baker's boy and a feral hunter who might turn on each other? And if he can't find a marketable angle, does he still bother trying to save them both? Or does he quietly pick one tribute to back? The real tension now isn't just who survives the games, it's this. When the cameras start rolling, what story gets told about Katniss and Peeta, and who gets written out of it first? Training days, when Peeta plays to win, not to woo. So when training starts, you don't have a love story walking into the gym. You have two terrified tributes from the poorest district, each trying to become the one name that gets remembered. At face value, The schedule looks the same: knot tying, camouflage, hand-to-hand, survival stations. But here's the real question. What happens when Peeta isn't quietly orbiting Katniss, but openly competing with her for the Capitol's attention? In canon, he throws those metal balls at the game maker's table to pull focus off her disastrous archery moment. In this timeline, he still hurls the weights. Only now the message isn't, "Notice Katniss," it's, "Look what I can do." This is where we talk about strategy. Katniss, as always, wants to disappear into the background, to be the angry girl in the corner who no one clocks as a threat until it's too late. Peeta, with no emotional promise tying him to her survival, he leans hard into being visible. Strong, charming, the kind of tribute the Capitol can imagine as a victor. So when Haymitch pushes them to coordinate, you can feel the relationship strain. Do they walk the training floor together or split up? Do they show a united front or two separate brands from District 12? Every shared decision turns into a low-level argument about risk. She wants less. He wants more. That tension spikes in the private sessions. In the original timeline, Peeta's choices are weirdly complementary to Katniss. Camouflage that hints at artistry, strength that makes their duo marketable. Here, there is a lot to uncover here about motive. He might still paint, but now it's a brutal Capitol skyline in blood tones, or a perfect bullseye done with knives. Something that says, "I understand your games, and I can play them." Or he drops the art entirely and goes full physical, lifting, wrestling, a calculated show of power meant to earn a high score that belongs to him alone. That part matters because those numbers drive sponsors, and sponsors drive who lives long enough to matter. And then we hit Caesar Flickerman stage. In canon, this is where Peeta detonates the star-crossed lovers twist. In our version, there's no confession, no soft glances at Katniss. So what fills that vacuum? Maybe he leans into the tragic baker's son, talking about the mine explosion, the smell of bodies on the wind, the reason District 12 children grow up knowing the taste of hunger. Maybe he uses dark humor, shrugging that the games are the only way someone from his district ever gets a warm bed. Or, most dangerously, he hints at a subtle rivalry, praising Katniss's hunting while framing himself as the one who actually knows how to talk to people. We're going to cover the fallout of this in the arena, but you can already feel the Capitol's obsession tilting. Without a romance to project on, do they fixate on Peeta's charisma, on Katniss's feral defiance, or on the potential of a District 12 civil war? And if the audience never falls in love with their love, what story becomes powerful enough to justify that infamous two-victor rule change at all? No star-crossed lovers, no rule change. And this is where we talk about what that missing story actually does in the canon games. Because the star-crossed lovers angle isn't just cute branding, it's infrastructure. At face value, Peeta's confession on Caesar's stage is a romantic twist. But here's the real question. What does that confession buy them? It hooks the Capitol audience instantly. Overnight, Katniss and Peeta stop being two more doomed kids from a starving district and become a serialized relationship. Every wound becomes angst. Every close call becomes a cliffhanger. Sponsors aren't just funding survival anymore. They're investing in a narrative payoff. A kiss. A reunion. The promise that this story means something. Haymitch sees that and weaponizes it. We're going to cover how his whole sponsor strategy pivots around feeding that relationship. The bread in the tree, the broth in the cave, the medicine that only arrives once Katniss performs the role of devoted lover. That part matters because the game makers are watching those audience spikes in real time. Ratings turn survival into romance, and romance into policy. So when Claudius Templesmith announces that mid-game's twist, 2 victors allowed if they're from the same district, it's not random generosity, it's a design choice. The Capitol is obsessed with this pair, so the game makers raise the stakes by dangling hope. Maybe both lovers live. Maybe your favorite tragic couple beats the system, as long as they keep playing by the game's emotional rules. Now strip the love out. No confession, no cave performance, no "she came back for me" moment. What does the Capitol latch onto instead? You still have Katniss as the girl on fire, the archer who blows up the career's supplies and salutes Rue's district on camera. You still have Peeta as the charming baker's son who can talk to anyone and suddenly throws a 100-pound weight across the training room. There is a lot to uncover here because those are compelling, but they're not a romance. They're separate shows. Katniss becomes the feral underdog symbol. Peeta becomes the witty underdog with surprising strength. Good television, sure. But what's the in-universe reason to invent a 2-from-1 district rule just to favor one coal district's pair who aren't even in a relationship? Without the lovers, the twist doesn't read as deliciously hopeful. It reads suspicious, political, and the Capitol hates seeing the machinery that openly. So in this timeline, the game makers still need fresh drama, but they'll reach for different levers. Harsher environmental hazards, longer cold snaps, extra mutts released earlier, a feast that forces tributes into a single kill box instead of dangling an advantage that conveniently benefits District 12. Structural rules stay the same. Spectacle shifts to pain, not promise. Which leaves us with a brutal problem. If there's no 2-victor rule, that final act in the arena can't hinge on a shared win or on a double suicide bluff, so who actually walks out of that blood-soaked field? And without the berries moment to terrify the Capitol, how far does this version of the games have to go before someone finally breaks? Careers, caves, and kill shots. Rewriting the 74th games, so let's walk back into that arena and watch it all play out again, beat by beat, with one crucial variable stripped out. Peeta doesn't love Katniss. Same cornucopia, same cameras. Completely different relationship. He still joins the careers. At face value, that move always makes sense for a baker's son with no weapon skills. You attach yourself to the district-trained killers, you get food, protection, and a front row seat to who's dangerous. But here's the real question. Without the secret promise to protect Katniss, does he still steer them away from her or toward her? In canon, he's constantly sandbagging. She's not that good, downplaying her score, nudging them off her trail. In this version, he has no reason to do that. He's watched her hunt for years. He knows exactly how fast she climbs, how straight she shoots. So when Marvel or Cato asks where the girl on fire will run, the honest survival answer is simple. Point to the trees. That part matters because it completely rewires the tree scene. You remember Katniss? Cornered, perched above them while they camp out below. In the book, Peeta eventually peels off and later warns her about the tracker jackers. Here, there is a lot to uncover here. Does basic decency win, or does the math of the games win? If he calls up Katniss, move, he's risking his alliance and outing his history with her. If he stays silent, the careers do the dirty work. Pattern interrupt for a second. Imagine two close-up shots. In one, Peter's face twists, he murmurs a warning, and we get the familiar chaos of stings and falls. In the other, he just watches. Same bees, same branches, no warning. Which version feels more honest to a Peter who's scared, hungry, and not in love? If he doesn't warn her, Katniss might die right there, and our whole question ends in a tree. So to keep exploring, let's assume he hesitates just long enough for Rue's plan to still work. But he doesn't go out of his way to help. He's stung, injured, and now very much on his own. This is where we talk about the cave. In the original timeline, the cave is a performance. Haymitch trades kisses for soup. The Capitol sends broth and medicine because the star-crossed lovers sell hope. Take out the lovers. And what's left? If Katniss stumbles on an injured Peeta now, she's staring at a boy who joined the people hunting her. No sponsor pressure, no dramatic you and me together promise. Just a liability. So why would she stay? There's one cold reason. Numbers. Keeping him alive a little longer might draw fire away from her, but nursing him back to health, risking infection, starving herself in a damp cave for days, without affection or strategic sponsor rewards, that's irrational even for Katniss's stubborn morality. Endgame, then, is brutal. No two-victor rule, no scripted romance, no Berry's gambit. If they both make it to the finale, they know only one District 12 tribute can be a victor. Peter doesn't walk toward the Mutts planning to die for her. He's fighting them and her because the games have stripped everything else away. So whose arrow flies truer in this version? One ending, Katniss, traumatized but practical, takes the shot when his back is turned because she remembers him aiming careers at her tree. Another, Peter, underestimated, uses his camouflage and timing, turning the arena itself into his weapon and catching her off guard at the lake. Or the darkest path, the Capitol, furious that their romance storyline never materialized, unleashes Mutts on both and forces a live, messy execution. No berries, just a warning. Which of those feels most consistent with who they are when you remove love from the equation? Hold that thought, because next we have to ask how a victor forged in that version of the arena would change everything that comes after. If Katniss dies here, does the rebellion die with her? So now we've got our arena fork. A hardened Peter or a hardened Katniss walks out alone. Here's the real question. If the games end without berries, without a romance, does the rebellion end there too? Start with branch 1. Katniss dies, Peter wins. On paper, the Capitol loves this. A single sympathetic victor from a poor district? That's perfect propaganda. Peter is charming, he can sell a tragic story about a dead hunting partner from home, and Caesar will eat it up. But notice what's missing. There is no star-crossed lovers narrative, no visual of two tributes from the same district clinging to each other as the arena burns. At face value, Snow still gets his spectacle. A brutal finale, a victor crowned, the games work. But that part matters because the berries weren't just a stunt. They were a forced admission on live television that the rules could bend. Without them, Snow never has to choose between killing both tributes or rewriting the games in real time. There's no moment where the audience sees the system panic. So what happens to Peter? He goes home to District 12 as a lone victor, not a symbol. There is a lot to uncover here. He still gets the house, the money, the mentoring duty, but his relationship to the capital stays clean. No public defiance, no on-screen threat to the game's authority. Sponsors remember him as the boy who survived, not the boy who broke the arena. Now flip it. Branch 2, Peeta dies, Katniss wins. She's still the girl on fire, she still shot the apple out of the pig's mouth, she still scored high in training. But when she comes home, she's not half of a love story. She's a traumatized hunter who did what she had to do. The Capitol can spin that. They can reframe her as a fiery but ultimately obedient victor who played by the rules and paid the price in blood. This is where we talk about Snow's risk assessment. In canon, he tells her outright, the only reason her defiance is tolerated is because it can be explained as love, not rebellion. Here, without the berries, there is no defiance to explain away. Katniss is dangerous in potential, not in practice. So why waste political capital cracking down hard on a girl who hasn't actually embarrassed the games? And if Snow isn't afraid yet, the districts don't get that same jolt of visible hope. No shared gasp as two kids threaten to beat the Capitol at its own show. No instant mythology of the couple who forced a rule change. The pressure builds slower, more quietly, which sounds safer for Snow, until you remember the quarter quell. Because we're going to cover this next. If the spark doesn't catch in the 74th games, what happens when the 75th rolls around? Does a colder Katniss or a well-behaved Peeta still become the symbol the revolution needs? Or does Snow finally get the one thing he's always promised himself? Total control, catching fire without Everlark, a colder quarter quell. So if Snow finally gets his wish for total control, whose body does he have to step over to claim it? For the rest of this timeline, we're going to cover the branch where Katniss is the sole victor of the 74th games. Peeta dies in the arena, not as a martyr for love, but as one more tribute who couldn't beat the system. Could Peeta have won instead? Absolutely. In that branch, you'd have a traumatized baker's son, no berry stunt, and a district that still saw the games as a closed loop. Different details, same political problem for Snow, no convenient love story to weaponize, and a victor whose defiance isn't softened by romance. This is where we talk about Snow's strategy in catching fire. In canon, his warning to Katniss leans on one fragile excuse. The Capitol believes you were just a girl in love, not a rebel. At face value, that gives him a way to walk back the berries without admitting the games were ever out of his control. In our version, he has no such cover. There was no confession on Caesar's stage, no cave kisses, no star-crossed lovers rule change. Her arrow to the arena force field reads as pure defiance. So his message on the victor's village balcony is colder. No roses on the table, no convince them you're in love, just you made the Capitol question the games. Fix it, or your district burns. That part matters because it strips away any illusion that Katniss can survive by performing a relationship. All she has to bargain with is obedience. Now jump to the victory tour. Remember all those staged kisses and the pregnancy reveal that kept Capitol audiences invested? Gone. The cameras don't follow a fairy tale couple. They follow a sullen girl who outsmarted the arena. The Capitol still admires her skill, but there's no soft focus romance to turn her into a poster. When unrest erupts in the districts, her only tool is Snow's script. And she's bad at it. You've seen how stiff her speeches already are. Without emotional beats with Peeta to distract the crowd, every apology sounds forced. Every promise of peace feels hollow. There is a lot to uncover here. The more she parrots the capital's lines, the more the districts see the gap between her words and the way she grips the podium. Inside the Quarter Quell arena, that missing romance changes everything. Katniss and Peeta, if he's alive in your mental side branch, are just pragmatic partners. Two victors from the same district who worked well together once. Finnick doesn't arrive pre-briefed to protect a legendary couple. He's told to keep an eye on a potentially useful archer. Johanna has even less reason to risk herself. Why bleed out for a girl the capital only half cares about? Here's the real question. Without Everlark, why would Plutarch justify such an extreme rescue at all? In canon, saving the star-crossed lovers sells in the capital as great television and in District 13 as priceless propaganda. In this timeline, Katniss is valuable, but she's not a beloved narrative. The hovercraft extraction becomes a risky asset retrieval, not a sacred mission. That makes the plan fragile, easier to cancel, easier to abandon if anything goes wrong. So when the arena blows and the sky cracks open, you have to ask, does the claw still come for her? Or does Snow finally get to watch a symbol die on live TV? A harder Katniss, a harsher war. If the claw does still come, it's not for a girl the capital has fallen in love with. It's for a weapon they haven't finished building. This is where we talk about what that weapon looks like without Peeta's love constantly dragging Katniss back towards softness. In the original timeline, his devotion keeps reminding her there is something beyond the arena, beyond the war. The way he throws bread to a starving stranger, paints rue in flowers, or refuses to kill at the cornucopia pulls her toward empathy, toward the dangerous hope that a victor could be more than a survivor. Take that away, and her emotional map shrinks. At face value, her world narrows to two fixed points, Prim and Gale. Everyone else becomes either an obstacle or a tool. The reason that part matters is because Prim represents pure protection, while Gale represents pure retaliation. There is no Peeta in the middle saying, "What kind of person do you want to be when this is over?" Because in her head, there is no over. So what does that do to her personality on screen? She starts drifting toward Johanna's lane. Johanna in the books is furious, stripped of the need to perform gentleness for the cameras. She weaponizes her anger. This alternate Katniss gets closer to that, less smiling for Caesar, less pretending to swoon, more dead-eyed responses and open contempt when the capital parades her trauma. Would she snap at Snow's roses on live TV instead of swallowing it? Probably. And the districts would eat that up, even as the capital tightens the leash. Here's the real question. Without Peeta as a moral counterweight, who actually challenges Gale? In canon, Peeta is the one who insists on saving civilians in the capital, who calls out Gale's trap designs as indistinguishable from the capital's war crimes. Without that relationship, Gale's black and white framing goes unchecked. The games taught Katniss that hesitation gets you killed. Gale teaches her that mercy gets your district bombed. It's an efficient, brutal feedback loop. By the time we reach Mockingjay, District 13 doesn't have to work as hard to shape her. A Katniss who has never experienced Peeta's unconditional, self-sacrificing love is easier to convince she is only valuable as a weapon. Coin's team rolls the Propo cameras, feeds her images of Prim in the bunkers, and says, "Aim here." And she does. There is a lot to uncover here about how much of Katniss's resistance to being used grows out of Peeta insisting she is a person first, symbol second. Pattern interrupt. Would you actually be more afraid of this version of Katniss? And if you lived in the districts, would that be a bad thing? A harsher Mockingjay might terrify the capital into surrender faster, but at what cost to the kind of Panem that emerges afterward? We're going to cover whether a colder revolution, led by a harder Katniss, leaves any room for the promise of something better than permanent war. Mockingjay minus the heart, propaganda without a love story. So, if the revolution hardens, what happens when you rip out its softest storyline? In canon, the Mockingjay isn't just a soldier. She's half of a public love story. But here's the real question. When Peeta never falls for Katniss, what does District 13 sell to Panem instead of star-crossed victors and real or not real? At face value, Coin's team is brilliant at propaganda. In the original timeline, they lean on Everlark constantly. Peeta's confession, on Caesar's stage, the cave kisses, the arena berries, all the way to his hijacked Katniss, "They're coming for you" broadcasts. That part matters because every painful update about Peeta turns the war into a relationship drama the districts can emotionally track. When Peeta is rescued, when he tries to choke Katniss, when he slowly rebuilds with real or not real, you're not just watching strategy. You're watching healing, forgiveness, and the promise that something human might survive the games. Take that away, and the propo have to pivot hard. Instead of cutting between Katniss's grief and Peeta's torture, we're going to cover a much colder media strategy. The cameras linger on mass graves, on the firebombed children in District 8's hospital, on the charred skeleton of District 12. The emotional anchor isn't, will they get Peeta back? It's how much more can the capital destroy before we burn it down? So the famous "the hanging tree" sequence. It's no longer intercut with Katniss thinking of a boy she might lose forever. It's pure execution footage and collapsing dams. Less romance, more righteous violence. The propaganda arc becomes a countdown, not a love story. That shift hits Katniss's image first. Without a televised relationship to complicate her, she stops being the girl caught between love and duty and becomes something sharper. She's the victor who walked out of 2 arenas and came back to avenge her district. This is where we talk about branding. Every shot of her is bow drawn, jaw clenched, eyes on Snow's mansion. She's not the Mockingjay who kisses Peeta on command. She's the Avenger who refuses to cry on command. Does that make the rebellion stronger or just angrier? There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta's mercy in canon, his insistence on holding onto his humanity, his horror at becoming a capital-made weapon, quietly restrains everyone around him. He's the one who reminds Katniss that killing Coin's prisoners on live TV would be crossing a line. Remove that voice, and District 13's anger has fewer breaks. A movement fueled only by grief and rage is much more willing to bomb a capital street twice and call it justice. And that raises the scariest question of all. Without Everlark as the emotional center, does Panem still land on the same ending? Or, when we finally reach that balcony over a dying Snow, do we see a different victor standing there, and a different, harsher version of peace being sold to the districts as the only thing left to hope for? Snow's nightmare or Snow's dream? Who wins this version of Panem? So when we step out onto that balcony in this version of Panem, the real question isn't just who dies, it's whose vision of the future actually wins. Remember Snow's core fear. It's never just rebellion in general, it's rebellion wrapped around a symbol he can't predict. In canon, That's Katniss plus Peeta plus this messy Everlark relationship that keeps slipping out of his control. Here, at face value, he gets his wish. No star-crossed lovers, no berries, fewer emotional wildcards on live TV. But that part matters, because the pressure doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. Without the romance to soften things, the games still produce a victor who became a symbol anyway. Only now she's sharper, more openly angry, and paired with Gale's harsher tactics instead of Peeta's humanizing presence. So what does Snow actually prefer? A love story he can spin, or a cold, tactical insurgency he can't charm the audience away from? Here's where we talk about timing. Without the double victor stunt and the berries, the districts don't get that instant, shared myth of defiance. No one whispers about a couple who beat the games. They just see another brutal arena, another dead tribute from their district, and a capital that keeps its promise that only one victor walks out. That slows everything down. The capital gets more time to do what it's always done best: isolate uprisings, disappear ringleaders, and make every district feel alone. In that version, Snow might actually hold power longer. Haymitch has less leverage with sponsors. There's no Mockingjay built out of televised kisses and rescue missions, and the quarter-quell twist, reaping from existing victors, lands as cruelty, not as a broken fairy tale. You can crush scattered anger with peacekeepers. You can't so easily crush a shared story of hope. But swing the camera and there's a darker possibility. Because when rebellion finally does ignite, it's not riding on Everlark, it's running on Gale's designs for snares, scaled up to city blocks. Fewer speeches, more bombs. We're going to cover this more later, but imagine District 13 getting exactly the kind of war it always wanted. Fast, ugly, deniable. Coin doesn't have to fight Peeta's plea for mercy on the Propo. She doesn't have to compete with a public that watched a relationship grow from the train ride to the hijacking. So, does Coin still die on that balcony? Without Peeta's voice, without years of shared history forcing Katniss to remember who she is outside the games, does she ever see through Coin's reflection of Snow? Or does she lean into being the perfect weapon she was trained to be? That's the terrifying question. Because the bleakest outcome isn't Snow winning or Coin winning. It's Panem winning the war and losing the one thing Peeta's love gave it, a moral compass. And if you remove that, what kind of victor and what kind of peace are we really left with? Books versus movies. How each version breaks without Everlark. So when you pull Peeta's love out of the story, you're not just changing Katniss's moral compass, you're ripping out the wiring of the books and the movies in completely different ways. Because on the page, we live inside Katniss's head. Every games, every train ride, every awkward meal in the Victor's village is filtered through one question she will not stop circling. What does Peeta really mean, and what do I feel back? At face value, that sounds romantic, but here's the real question. What happens when you delete that entire emotional puzzle, and Peeta is just a teammate from your district? Suddenly, the first-person POV tilts. Those long, spiraling passages where she replays the bread in the rain or obsesses over his confession on Caesar's stage now have to be about something else. Without his love, the tension shifts from, is he pretending, to, can I trust anyone at all? The books stop being a relationship autopsy and become a slow, psychological descent. We're going to cover war, trauma, and survival either way. But without Peeta as a promise of gentleness, every inner monologue gets harsher, more clinical, more paranoid. That part matters because her confusion about love is what softens the brutality. It's the one arena where she's allowed to be unsure. On screen, the problem is almost the opposite. The films don't have her internal narration, so they lean hard on visuals and marketing. The cave in the 74th Games, the beach kiss in Catching Fire, the real or not real whisper in Mockingjay. Those are trailer moments, poster moments, the emotional peaks the studio sells to an audience that might not care about food shortages in District 12, but will show up for a doomed love triangle. Take away Peeta's love, and you don't just cut a subplot. You erase the hook the capital of our world used to get people into seats. The adaptations would have to pivot. Imagine the same footage, but the camera lingers on strategy maps, not hand-holding. The score swells over uprisings and air raids instead of a reunion hug. The movies become pure war thriller, action, political intrigue, coin versus snow, Katniss as weapon, not lover. Pattern interrupt time. Close your eyes and replay two scenes. The bread in the rain, the beach in Catching Fire. Now strip out the romance. Peeta throws the bread because Haymitch told him a stronger tribute from his district improves their odds. On the beach, he's a strategic ally, calmly outlining how her survival serves the rebellion. Which version survives that surgery better? The book locked in Katniss's traumatized POV, or the film that can cut away to riots in District 8? There is a lot to uncover here, but the core is this. The films lose a major audience lure. The books lose their antidote to Katniss's cynicism. One becomes less marketable. The other becomes almost unbearably bleak. And as we move into how the games themselves would play out, we have to ask, without Everlark, does the story of Panem still function as a story of hope at all? The cost of erasing a crush, what this timeline teaches us. So here's the twist you don't see coming at first. Erase one unrequited crush at the reaping, and you don't just change who kisses whom in a cave. You change how a nation learns to imagine mercy in the middle of the games. At face value, the chain reactions we've been tracking sound technical. No star-crossed lover's confession on Caesar's stage, so Haymitch has no romance to weaponize. No romance, so the capital never pushes that two-victor rule change. No shared victory, so Katniss either dies in the 74th Games or wins alone with no berries stunt to publicly humiliate Snow. That part matters because the Quarterquell then unfolds with colder alliances, a Katniss who trusts no one, and a Peeta who's just another traumatized victor, not the emotional center of a rebellion. But here's the real question. What was Peeta's love actually doing in the system of Panem? Because once you strip away the swooning, it starts to look less like a subplot and more like infrastructure. It builds bridges between districts. Rue's song, Thresh-sparing Katniss, even Finnick's quiet loyalty all land differently when the games have already aired a story about someone choosing devotion over spectacle. Peeta's feelings soften Katniss on camera, turning her from a feral survivor into someone the districts can read as protective, conflicted, reachable. This is where we talk about control. The Capitol thinks it's scripting a ratings boost, look, romance in the arena, but Peeta's love gives them a story they can't fully own. When he offers to die so Katniss can go home, when he clings to her in the Quarterquell force field, he's putting a different relationship on screen. Person to person, not tribute to Capitol. The rebellion seizes that. Suddenly, the Mockingjay isn't just a girl with a bow. She's the promise, that tenderness can survive the arena's logic. Take that away, and the Mockingjay branding shifts. Without the cave, without hijacked Peeta as a living reminder of what the capital destroys, Katniss's image tilts toward pure vengeance. The propo become about payback, not protection. Districts still revolt, but the moral center of that revolt is darker. Fewer remember who the real enemy is moments. More make them pay. Post-war Panem in this timeline probably gets its revolution sooner and its peace later. There is a lot to uncover here, but the core is tight. Character and politics in the Hunger Games are fused. You pull out one soft element, one boy insisting on love in a place designed to kill it, and the entire moral architecture tilts toward brutality. So the question hanging over canon is brutal and simple. Is the victory we get only possible because someone like Peeta keeps choosing mercy, even when the reasonable response is hate? And if that's true in Panem, what does it say about revolutions in our own world, where it's always easier to build a new arena than a new kind of relationship? Because as we move into how the games themselves would function without that infrastructure, we have to ask, when you remove love from the equation, what exactly is left to win? Your turn in the arena, choose your Katniss, shape your Panem, because when you strip love out of the arena, you're not just changing a relationship, you're changing the entire physics of Panem. So here's the real question as we close this out. Which Katniss are you choosing? The canon girl on fire, tempered by Peeta's love, or the alternate Katniss we built together, harder, angrier, and maybe the capital's worst nightmare for a very different reason? At face value, it sounds simple. Romantic Katniss versus ruthless Katniss. But that part matters because every tiny decision we changed, no crush at the Reaping, no confession on Caesar's stage, no star-crossed lover's narrative for Haymitch to weaponize, rewires the games, the rebellion, and the ending of Panem. So I want you to pick a timeline and defend it. Tell me in the comments, in your version, who actually wins the 74th Games without Everlark propping up that 2-victor rule change? Does Peeta, playing purely to win, walk out as a lone victor from District 12? Does Katniss still pull off the berry stunt without a partner to die with her? Or does that moment vanish entirely and leave Snow's arena intact? Which outcome feels most plausible to you, and why? This is where we talk about power. Not just the power of weapons or strategy, but the power of one person's devotion. Is Peeta's love a weakness that risks everything? Handing Snow leverage, opening Katniss up to hijacking, torture, and endless manipulation? Or is it the exact kind of strength a revolution needs if it doesn't want to turn into a new capital in a different uniform? In your Panem, is love the liability or the safety valve? We're going to cover more of these branching paths in future videos. Other what-ifs, other districts, other quiet choices that end up toppling presidents. So if you want to keep walking through these alternate arenas with us, you can join our little Victor's Village here on the channel. Think of it as the version the capital can't control. Long-form Hunger Games what-ifs, political breakdowns, and all the messy reasons people start, win, and lose rebellions. Because there is a lot to uncover here. Every time you erase a crush, you erase a sponsor gift, a rule change, a symbol the districts cling to when the lights go out. Or you create space for something colder to take its place. A deadlier Katniss, a bloodier war. Maybe a Panem that technically wins its freedom, but loses the promise that people can be more than what the games made them. So, your turn in the arena. Drop your version of Katniss, your winner of the 74th Games, and your rebellion ending down below. Tell me whether your Panem is better or worse without Peeta's love on the board. Because in this world, even a single crush can topple an empire, or, if you erase it, let that empire stand just long enough for something even more terrifying to rise in its place. And we haven't even asked what happens when snow isn't the scariest thing in Panem anymore.